If authorities have charged you with a federal crime and you want to get the best possible outcome, then you need to learn as much as possible, including security scores. My name is Michael Santos, and this article is going to describe security scores, but I'm going to start out with a story of how an understanding of these security scores helped me transition from a high security penitentiary to a medium security prison, and then later that same knowledge helped me transfer to a low security prison, then a minimum security camp, then to a halfway house, then to home confinement. None of that would have happened had I not started understanding how the system operated. And that's why I think it's so important for you to understand security scores. And this article, you can access it right on our website at prisonprofessors.com. In fact, if you go to the top of our website, you can click on this little section right here that says services, click the drop down arrow. You will see this section here called consulting topics, and these are the topics that our sentence mitigation experts use to help people really understand how to get the best possible outcomes. And this particular one that I'm reading right now is number 24, called Security Scores in Prison. So let's turn back to that particular article, but let me start with this story. Here's the backstory. I went to prison. I had made some bad decisions as a young man. The judge sentenced me to 45 years. As a result of that lengthy sentence, I started my term inside of a high security penitentiary. Now, since I'd never been in prison before, I didn't really know the difference. I didn't know that there was a difference of life in these different institutions. So there was a different way of life. So when I began inside of the penitentiary, I really continued the path that I began inside of the jail, which is to transform my life and to begin preparing for success. Those preparations resulted in me getting an undergraduate degree and a master's degree pretty early on during my sentence. But more importantly, they helped me understand how to navigate the different channels of the Bureau of Prisons. That's what we want you to do. In my case, I was in a high security penitentiary and I wanted to transfer to the right medium security prison, because that's generally the way it works. You go from one institution to another level. So I started in a high, I wanted to go to a medium, but I wanted to go to the right medium because at the time I was in my graduate school program and I wanted to make sure I could continue. But the volatility level was just getting too high inside of the USP, the high security penitentiary where I was confined. So I had to lay a series of groundwork, and that series of groundwork is really what a personalized mitigation strategy is all about. We encourage you to create your own mitigation strategy. The strategy that worked for me required me to work with a mentor that I had, publish a document in a peer-reviewed journal. That document was called Transcending the Wall. We published it in a peer-reviewed journal. Then we hatched a rather elaborate campaign to get it into the Director of Education for the Bureau of Prisons. That led to a meeting in Washington, D.C. with the Director of Education for the Bureau of Prisons, and that allowed my mentor to grant access to go and visit different federal prisons, and that's how I got some inside scoop that the best place for me was going to be the medium security prison inside at McKean in Pennsylvania. And at the time, it had a reputation as being known as the Dream McKean, because although it was a medium security prison, we had access to a warden that really supported this concept of self-directed learning objectives. And so I made a lot of progress there. That was where I concluded my master's program. And I just want you to understand that although the system may have rules and policies and procedures, an individual who knows how to engineer a mitigation strategy can maneuver themselves around the system. But it's really important to understand security scores. And so that's what this article is all about. And you can read it yourself. I like to read these articles for a number of reasons. One, they help me spot typographical errors. But another reason is that I think it's important to deliver, we think it's important to deliver content in any manner that you want to receive it. So that now if you're driving down the road, you can just click on this and listen to the audio version. There's certainly no reason to watch me, but listening may be easier to get this information while you're driving or exercising or anything else like that. So let's talk about security scores in federal prison and how to get to the best prison. So the custody and classification system determines the type of facility where a person will serve the sentence. Security levels determine how administrators will run the prison. Although no one can change the past, a person's decisions can influence whether they serve time in a prison of minimum security or whether they must serve time in prisons with more restrictions. Judges sentence individuals to the custody of the Attorney General. As such, many factors influence where the individual will serve the sentence. The type of offense represents one determinant, but other factors will also play into the decision. The more individuals understand, the better they can position themselves to respond if administrators try to pigeonhole them into the wrong security level. In Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-Year Prison Term, I wrote about my experience of serving time in every security level. I did not have a history of violence or previous incarceration. The length of my sentence necessitated that I begin inside of a high-security penitentiary. After several years, I transitioned to low security levels, including administrative facilities, medium security, low security, minimum security, and a residential release center for the final year of my sentence. Earning Freedom shows how a strategic adjustment can lead to placement in prisons with higher levels of liberty and lower levels of stress. In fact, in that book, I described that entire strategy that I started this video with. I encourage all people facing a sentencing hearing or time in prison to use critical thinking skills. Learn as much as possible about developing mitigation strategies. Those strategies may position a person to serve the term in prisons with lower volatility levels, fewer restrictions, and the highest levels of liberty. A person's family members will appreciate the lower levels of intensity when they visit. Consider a few case-in-point descriptions that provide a glimpse of some people who are serving time for white-collar offenses in facilities with higher levels of volatility than necessary. So the different security levels. In the Bureau of Prisons, each institution falls into one of 5 different security levels. Individuals who anticipate that they may experience time inside should have a basic understanding of each. The different levels include minimum, low, medium, high, and administrative. There are some minor variations within each security level. For example, some of those security levels may include subcategories such as satellite low, or special management unit, or special offender yard. But the levels above provide a basic understanding of the different categories. According to the Bureau of Prisons website, less than 18% of the total prison population serves time inside of a minimum security camp. The main criteria for serving time inside of a minimum security camp includes the following. Individuals must be within 10 years of the real estate. Individuals must not have a documented history of violence or sex offense over a prescribed period of time, at least 10 years. And individuals must not have any history of escape attempts. When considering the entire federal prison population of more than 200,000 people, more than 18% of the people would meet such criteria. So why doesn't a greater percentage of the entire federal prison population serve their sentence inside of a minimum security camp? I think that could be a typo with 100,000 people, 200,000 people. There's probably now closer to 130, 140,000 people in federal prison. We could write volumes on this subject matter of where people serve their time. But rather than making this lesson too dense with too many explanations, we want to provide a broad perspective. Now, our personal mitigation experts can offer more insight, and we encourage you, reach out to them. They will use these tools as consulting, part of the consulting process, but they will also be able to give real personal insight, and that's the real value of our work. It's the depth and breadth of content that we offer. So let's talk about the different security levels. The administrative level facilities hold people from any security level. In other words, people who have been convicted of murder will serve time alongside people who are convicted of defrauding a client through an eBay transaction. As a consequence of the diverse group of people inside administrative level institutions, authorities impose strict controls and restrictions. They generally hold people in those facilities for specific reasons that include the MCC and the FDCs, for example. They're more like federal jails where people are awaiting judicial proceedings. Then there are the more secure federal prisons like the ADMAX unit, or the special management unit. And those hold people that may be convicted of really volatile offenses like terrorism, or they may be gang leaders and have influence over a lot of people, or they may have extensive escape attempts, or authorities may consider them as a real threat to security. So those types of institutions hold specific highly, people that the Bureau of Prisons thinks needs a higher level of scrutiny and control. And then there's the Federal Transit Center in Oklahoma. That's also an administrative facility. I was there many times. And that is a facility that holds people from everybody because they're coming from all over the country en route to get to the next institution. And there are detention centers really around the country that also are part of this transit system because the Bureau of Prisons doesn't have a direct route, right? If I'm in Miami and I'm going to travel to New York, I may have to go from Miami to Atlanta to Oklahoma, stay in Oklahoma for a little while, and then wait for the circle of planes to move, and then it'll take me up to the northeast route. So that transit center in Oklahoma is the hub of the entire nation's Bureau of Prisons, and there are planes going there every day, and that's all it does is transport people. A more specific type of an administrative facility is the Federal Medical Center. Now, obviously, as the Bureau of Prisons has grown, I mean, when I went to prison, there were fewer than 30,000 people in federal prison. Today, there's certainly well over 100,000 people in federal prison. It has had to specialize in certain ways. And one of the ways is to accommodate an aging population because people serve sentences that are far too long, far too many people serving time. And the Bureau of Prisons has to accommodate what legislators have done with these laws that really spawn mass incarceration. And so one of the ways that they've responded is by creating specialized institutions. So if somebody has medical needs, they would serve their term inside of a federal medical center like Butner or Devens in Massachusetts, or I think it's Carlswell or something, the one in Fort Worth for women. There are several medical facilities, and in those medical facilities, they have a higher level of care. More licensed healthcare professionals work in those facilities, so it's a little bit easier to get medical care, even surgery, hip replacement, knee replacements, open heart surgery. A lot of that can be done inside of those facilities. So it's not uncommon for people to be serving time in one institution and then get transferred to a federal medical center where they will undergo the medical treatment necessary, the aftercare, and then when they're deemed to be better, the system may send them back to their designated institution. Or sometimes these facilities are on federal correctional complexes, so they may just go from, like Butner, for example. It has a medical center, but it also has an adjacent USP, an FCI, a LO, probably even has a camp. And so the person may just move around from within that complex. So the Federal Medical Center is a little bit different because they may have specialized area just for minimum security people. For example, I think Devon has a camp, but it's within a complex of a medical center. So there's a lot of doctors and surgeons right there on staff. So there are 7 factors that determine an institution's security level, and they include the use of mobile patrols that drive around the institution's perimeter 24 hours a day, gun towers around high security penitentiaries, perimeter barriers that separate the prison from the community, like high walls and barbed wire fences with coils of concertina razor wire on top. They have detection devices like metal detectors and sound guns that can intercept conversations. There's internal security that include locks on doors and bars on windows. There's housing issues such as where the institution confines people locked in rooms, cages, or open dormitories. And then there's, of course, the ratio of staff to people serving the sentence. In a high security penitentiary, there's going to be a really high concentration of staff, at least as composed to lower level facilities. In a minimum security camp, on the flip side, there will be more like, sometimes there might only be 1 or 2 staff members overseeing several hundred people serving the sentence. So obviously, as security levels increase, liberties and the restrictions decrease. The most secure federal prison in the United States is the administrative maximum security prison at the Federal Correctional Complex in Florence, Colorado. I've been there, not only as somebody who was serving time in the camp, but I worked inside of the ADX, but I also went there as part of the Prison Professors program where we have a course that is taught inside of the ADX. So prisoners confined in that institution have very little contact with others. And similarly, the BOP operates a few special management units like at Lewisburg, and I think they have one at Thomasville or Thompson or something like that. And they're all located within United States penitentiaries. If a person is sentenced to ADX or the SMU, it's because of authorities have deemed that person as being predacious in nature or incapable of functioning in a more open prison environment. So if you're reading this article on the internet, it's unlikely that you'll serve a sentence in a supermax or high security penitentiary. I serve time in every facility, so I can respond to specific questions about those facilities, and certainly our mitigation experts on our team can do the same. So there's cases in point of why it's difficult to serve time in high security penitentiaries. There's the case of Robert Allen Stanford, who is a prominent financier. Before the financial crisis of 2009, Stanford was always on CNBC. I used to watch it when I was in prison, and he'd be talking about his business ventures and so as a billionaire. But later, when he got charged for running a big Ponzi scheme, he really wreaked havoc on the media about how the SEC was targeting him and the DOJ was targeting him, and his response really caused him to get into some hot water where a federal judge advised the Bureau of Prisons in the Statement of Reasons to hold him inside of a United States penitentiary. And he's been serving a sentence at the USP in Coleman, Florida. As a result, he's frequently the target of attack by other people. So it's best to try and stay out of a USP. In my view, I was there for 6 or 7 years in a USP. While I was there, I didn't have a single problem, so it's certainly possible to function in there without much problem from other people. But it is more volatile. There was a lot of bloodshed, and there's a lot of pressure. And you've got to have a solid mitigation strategy, as I described earlier, to avoid those types of complications. And you can read through the article. There's no reason for me to read through all of this nonsense. You can read it yourself if you're interested in getting more data about how they operate. And there's also medium security federal institutions. I was certainly in 2 of those, right? I was at the FCI in McKean, as I said, and also the FCI in Ferreton, New Jersey for a little while. I can tell you the level of stress that comes off of you when you transfer from a high security penitentiary to a medium, significant. I didn't know any better until I got to a medium, but it was way less stressful. And here's a CEO, Tom Peters, also convicted of a white collar fraud conviction. But as a result of the length of his sentence, he has a higher level of security points, and he began serving his sentence inside of a medium security prison. So a lot more volatile than a low, but a lot less volatile than a USP. I went to a low security prison in 1996, I think, in Fort Dix, New Jersey. And I was there for about 8 years. A low security prison, again, the stress level comes way down. The advantage of being in a low security prison, there's certainly a lot of people. So certainly more than 1,000 people. I think at Fort Dix we had 2,500 people. And there were a lot of programs available. And many of the people there could have been inside of a minimum security camp, but they were in a low because of immigration status maybe, or they had public safety factors and they couldn't get to a minimum security camp. But I did a good time. In fact, I got married inside of a low security federal prison when I was in my 16th year of imprisonment. Mark Dreyer, a guy who had a really good mitigation strategy. I can't reveal much more than that because we're not allowed to, but he's a super smart guy. He earned his undergrad from Yale, his professional degree from Harvard Law. Unfortunately, he got into a series of troubles that led to a white-collar crime, and he got a sentence of 20 years. But as a result of good mitigation strategies, it was certainly far less than what prosecutors wanted, and it resulted and those mitigation strategies also helped him get out even earlier. So you've got to be thinking about the mitigation strategies that you're going to create. Hopefully you'll be able to serve your sentence inside of a minimum security federal prison camp or a satellite camp. That's where I served my final decade. And it's just a lot easier. There's a lot less pressure there. I'm not going to say there's no volatility, but it's kind of like the volatility of living in a corporate office park or something. There's going to be some people that snap. But for the most part, if a person minds his own business, he can get through it and get through it with his dignity intact, I hope. So there's some questions here at the end of our little lesson here that we would encourage you to think about, and think about what strategies are you using to make sure that you serve your sentence in the best possible environment. So you got to understand security scores to help you get there. And you can learn a lot just by looking at all of the content available on our website. Of course, we've got mitigation specialists that can help you at every stage of the journey, and you need to be thinking about every stage in the journey if you want to get best outcomes and avoid the complications that really make life difficult for other people that go through the journey, people that don't prepare. But you're somebody who's preparing because you're here still watching this video. I am Michael Santos with Prison Professors. On behalf of our entire team, we do hope that you will subscribe to us on YouTube. We hope that you will like us if you're seeing this on Facebook, and we hope that you'll give us a call if you need some help in getting ready for the journey ahead. I want to thank you again for being a part of our community.